The moment I saw the audit alert, my stomach dropped like a bad elevator. It was late, 9:47 p.m. to be exact, and I was reviewing logs over chamomile tea, trying to ignore the muscle knot blooming between my shoulders. I wasn't expecting sabotage. I was expecting the usual, maybe a bug in the pipeline or another junior analyst accidentally querying live data with a select. But this was a full schema clone attempt, unauthorized. Source, VP DVO2. I stared at the screen, blinked once, then clicked into the access log. It wasn't just a sandbox test. Someone had tried to run a mirror of the entire ML framework. Weights, scaffolding, even the training pipeline pathing, like they were building a backup or planning a heist. I didn't panic. You don't survive 15 years in corporate AI by panicking. I took a screenshot, encrypted the event chain, and logged a private entry in Valence's vault, my LLC's control system. Then I sent a concise, professional note to the CTO with a timestamp and escalation tag. His response? Silence. Just like last time. Hey, before we go deeper, do me a quick favor. If you're still listening, take a second to subscribe and tap the like button. 97% of people listen to these stories without subscribing, and your support really helps the team bring more of these to life. All right, let's keep going. The next morning, I did what I always did. I put on my slate gray blazer, grabbed a coffee I wouldn't drink, and stepped into the 8 a.m. review meeting like nothing was wrong. Thursday decks had become ritual. I'd stand at the head of the glass-walled conference room, running the executive team through predictive accuracy metrics, latency improvements, and rollout timelines for version 3.1 of our recommendation engine. I knew which slides they'd tune out, I knew which ones the CEO would pretend to understand. And I always left one Easter egg buried in the appendix, a dummy metric labeled Latent Drift Anomaly Impact Class E. No one ever asked. I wasn't angry, I was detached. Like watching someone carelessly toss around a porcelain vase and thinking, one day it'll break, just a matter of when. I'd built the vase, I'd designed the kiln, I'd written the damned glaze formula, and none of them ever read the label. The thing is, Zentech didn't own the kiln, or the glaze, or the fire that forged the whole thing. 15 years ago, I was just a junior ML dev with a stubborn streak and a nighttime obsession with modular architecture. So I registered a development entity, Valence Systems LLC, and coded the foundational layers of the model spine under its umbrella. Zentech licensed the framework every year under usage-only agreement. Non-transferable, non-editable, renewal-based. They never read it, just signed the doc every fiscal Q1 like clockwork. Why did I do it that way? Because the first time someone tried to take credit for my work, back when I was 28 and still thought meritocracy was real, I learned the hard way that attribution isn't protection. Ownership is. And I owned this. Quietly, fully, legally. So when VP DevZio2 tried to clone my system without authorization, he wasn't just violating protocol, he was triggering clause 7.4b in the agreement. Replication of licensed architecture outside authorized nodes constitutes grounds for immediate termination of access, which meant I had options, a lot of them. I left the Thursday meeting without saying a word. The CEO had spent most of it tapping at her phone anyway. One of the other VPs had interrupted to suggest integrating a third-party LLM wrapper into our core pipeline, something he clearly didn't understand but had read about in Forbes. No one noticed the tightening in my jaw when he called my work legacy scaffolding. No one asked why I skipped over slide 14 entirely. That night, I sat at my desk and opened a blank message. Subject line, Framework Inquiry, Private Use Discussion. Recipient, Lauren Kai, CEO of Echelon Systems, Zentech's biggest rival. My finger hovered for just a moment, then I hit send. She didn't even bother to close her Slack tab. I watched the blue dot bounce next to someone's name while she scrolled with 2 fingers and smirked like I'd asked for a unicorn, not a raise that wouldn't even cover the cost of eggs these days. 15 years, through 3 reorgs, 5 product relaunches, a failed IPO attempt, and the acquisition that gutted half the team, I stayed. I worked weekends. I patched production on Christmas Eve. I trained every fresh-out-of-college AI brat they threw in my direction. And I did it because I believed in the architecture, not the people who rented their titles above mine. She leaned back in her absurd ergonomic chair, one of those $1,000 mesh-backed monstrosities finance approved for posture, and gave me a smile I can only describe as bored cruelty. like I was interrupting her day by asking for the bare minimum. 10%? She said, blinking like the words had personally offended her. Then came the chuckle. Soft at first, then louder and sharp enough to draw the attention of the EA outside her glass-walled office. You're lucky we haven't automated your job already. And then the kicker. Everyone's replaceable. She waved her hand like she was swatting away a mosquito. If you're unhappy, there's the door. There was no malice in her voice. That's what made it worse. It was mechanical, rehearsed. Like she'd said the same thing to 5 other people that week and hadn't bothered to remember any of their names. Just a box to tick on the cost-cutting checklist. She assumed I'd sit there, maybe bargain, maybe beg. She assumed I was trapped, some aging engineer clinging to a role because I didn't know how to reinvent myself like the interns with startup equity dreams and hoodie dress codes. But the thing about assuming people are stuck, you stop noticing when they've already left. I didn't argue, didn't flinch, just smiled and said one word, understood. Then I stood, walked out, and forwarded 2 files from my company account to my encrypted private inbox. The first, the full dev license agreement between Zentech and Valin Systems LLC, usage only, annual renewal, non-transferable, non-replicable under clause 7.4b, my name, my LLC, their signature. The second, the internal log chain showing VP DevEO2's unauthorized attempt to clone the entire framework stack 4 nights earlier. The timestamp on that violation? Clear as glass. I saved the emails in a dated folder, added 1 more layer of encryption, and closed my laptop. That night, I didn't sleep, but not from anxiety. I was calm, focused, like a switch had flipped. Not anger, not vengeance, just alignment. For the first time in years, I saw everything clearly. Zentech didn't deserve what I'd built, and they certainly didn't own it. They thought they were sitting atop a gold mine with my framework propping up every predictive tool they pitched to investors. But they never read the deed. They were just tenants, arrogant ones, and the lease was about to end. I woke up early the next morning and brewed real coffee for the first time in months. Black, no sugar, bitter, like honesty. My inbox was already active. Lauren Kai had replied, "Let's meet. Today, I'll clear my afternoon." Attached was a calendar invite. Echelon Systems HQ, downtown. I looked over at my Zentech badge on the kitchen counter, flipped it over, and dropped it in the drawer. My calendar still said performance review, follow-up Q&A for noon. Instead, I picked a darker blazer, pulled up my system access portal, and quietly began preparing the one-click revocation protocol embedded in the framework. They thought I'd ask twice. They'd never read what I wrote in the margins. We met at a tucked-away cafe 2 blocks from Echelon's HQ, the kind of place with minimalist decor and absurdly expensive espresso that no one actually drinks. They just order to signal taste. Lauren walked in 10 minutes early, no entourage, no airs, just a steel-colored pantsuit and a presence that filled the room before she spoke. She shook my hand, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "I've been waiting for this message for 3 years." I didn't waste time with flattery or drama. I slid my laptop across the table and opened the sandbox environment, loaded up the latest build of my modular framework, live demo, 0 latency, explainability layer embedded, federated pipeline pre-integrated. She leaned in, absorbed the structure in silence, and then, still not blinking, said, "You wrote this whole thing?" "I designed it, built it, licensed it, updated it alone for over a decade." Lauren closed the laptop slowly, sat back, and said, "We'll offer CTO, 600K base, 2% equity. You define the roadmap, you own your tech. Your call. No pitch, no seduction, just respect." And that was the first real offer I'd had in 15 years. I didn't hesitate. I didn't need to think it over. I'd done the thinking already, every Thursday at 8 a.m. under the dead eyes of executives who never even asked why the drift metrics had stabilized, or how the segmentation engine had gone from 82% to 94.7% accuracy over 3 quarters. I signed the term sheet that night, date stamped, countersigned, encrypted. On the Uber ride home, I opened my VPN, authenticated into Zentech's compliance portal, and pulled up the license control panel. Their rights to Valin Systems architecture were set to expire end of quarter, but Clause 9.3a gave me the right to immediate termination in the event of breach, with replication attempt logs as evidence. I uploaded the audit trail from VP DevEO2, appended the CEO's dismissive comments from my review, then toggled the revocation flag. 1 click. Their access expired at 11:41 p.m. No warning, no drama, no explosion, just quiet disconnection. The framework detached from their systems instantly. Usage calls redirected to a dead endpoint. The scaffolding began freezing processes as soon as the heartbeat pings failed. They wouldn't even know it until morning. I stared at the screen for a minute longer. No sense of revenge, no joy, just clean removal, like pulling a key from a lock and watching the gears go still. I powered down the laptop and stood at the window, watching the city blink like nothing had happened. Zentech thought they'd cut dead weight. They had no idea I was the spine. And now, they were spineless. The first flags came in around 7:12 a.m. Pacific. Predictive pricing stopped rendering across half of the North American product grid. The system defaulted to static tables, 2 quarters out of date, which meant toothbrushes were showing up at $42.19, and seasonal items from last year's inventory were being promoted like they were premium launches. Then the personalization engine buckled. New users were being funneled into deprecated segments. One Midwest customer received a welcome back email with a promo for baby formula, addressed to a man who'd only ever bought motorcycle oil and Bluetooth speakers. Support tickets exploded. By 10 o'clock a.m., internal Slack threads were crawling with messages, mostly from sleep-deprived engineers trying to patch the failures with zero visibility. Cache refreshes, database rollbacks. Someone even suggested hard-coding static fallback paths like it was 2012 again. Didn't matter, because my framework wasn't a plugin. It was the scaffolding, the spine, the invisible lattice that held their prediction logic, model orchestration, and input routing together. Remove it, and it didn't just fail, it unraveled. At 10:43 a.m., someone in analytics finally checked the dependency graph and realized half the services were routing through calls that no longer existed. By 11:30, one of the mid-level engineers posted the message that made it clear they were truly screwed. Why are the weights encrypted now? Who authorized this change? No one answered, because no one in that building had the keys. Meanwhile, I sat in a quiet corner of Echelon's 10th floor. New badge, new laptop, clean terminal. Lauren had offered me the corner office. I declined. Said I'd rather sit where I could hear the product team chatter. You can't lead innovation from an ivory tower. You lead it by listening. I watched the Zentech fallout unfold in real time, through social media threads, customer screenshots, and one particularly damning LinkedIn post from a former client who tagged the CEO directly and asked, "Is your AI drunk or just broken?" No one from their PR team responded. They were too busy figuring out why a company supposedly built on machine learning suddenly couldn't make sense of a product catalog. By noon, support had logged over 400 complaints. Revenue projections started slipping. The midday ops call, usually a sleepy Zoom where 3 people pretended to be alert, turned into a silent war zone. I knew exactly how that room looked. Who sat where, which exec would blame legacy systems, and which one would quietly text a recruiter during the chaos. But none of them would point to the license clause buried in legal's shared folder. None of them would say the words, "We lost her, and she took the architecture." And me? I didn't gloat, didn't tweet, didn't even forward the Slack screenshot a friend sent me from the inside. I just opened a new file in my IDE and began sketching the foundation for Gen 2. Because this wasn't a victory lap. This was the rebuild. By Monday morning, the rot had spread everywhere. Marketing was first to crack. Their A/B tools stopped serving variant campaigns, reverting to the fallback "Welcome to Zentech" template, last edited during a leadership rebrand that featured a now disgraced CMO. Every email blast went out without segmentation, without personalization, and worst of all, without context. Customers in New York were getting promos for ski gear in July. One client forwarded a screenshot to half the executive team with the subject line, "Do you even know who I am?" Then sales started screaming. Lead scores all defaulted to 0. Account prioritization tools showed red exclamations or nothing at all. The enterprise CRM sync failed outright. One of the sales leads tried refreshing the pipeline dashboard and instead got a blank screen with a single line of text, "Endpoint not found." Operations was next. Procurement schedules drifted, fulfillment models dumped predictive ordering, and a partner forecast ran an ancient script that backordered 3,000 units of a discontinued smart scale. Someone tried restoring last week's instance from cache. The models came back mangled, dependencies broken, data pathways corroded. That's when the panic calls started. At 10:17 a.m., the CTO called an emergency huddle. He hated video calls, always insisted on in-person. But this time it was on Zoom, his voice tight, his shirt rumpled. Legal joined 5 minutes in, her camera off, voice level. They pulled up the developer license agreement on a shared screen. She revoked usage at 7:41 p.m. Friday, Legal said. Clause 7.4b, breach via unauthorized replication attempt. The agreement was never converted to perpetual. You let it lapse. Silence. The VP of engineering, still green, still pretending he could code, blinked like he was seeing snow. Wait, she could just cut it off? She owned it, Legal said flatly. We licensed, annually, and we breached. Then the final invoice was screen shared. My invoice. There was no snark, no passive-aggressive commentary, just the subject line, crisp and direct. Termination due to executive hostility, clause 7.4b. It sat there, unmoving, while 23 people silently realized what had happened. Some stared, others looked away. The CEO wasn't on the call. Of course she wasn't. Then came the second reveal. Buried at the end of the compliance packet, metadata logs from my watchdog script. A silent listener embedded inside the framework from the very beginning. Its sole purpose, to detect unauthorized mirroring attempts and auto-report them to my legal proxy. It had fired 4 times in total, all 4 from the same user, VP Dev Year 2. Each attempt logged, time-stamped, routed to the escrow archive. They hadn't just lost a framework, they'd triggered its self-defense protocol. The CTO took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose like it physically hurt. She gave us everything, he muttered, and we mocked her. No one disagreed, because now they all saw the same thing. I wasn't just a senior dev who got tired of being overlooked. I was the architect, the keeper of the very structure they'd leaned on. And now that it was gone, all they had left was a broken shell and a framework that answered to someone else. By Wednesday, Zentek's internal dashboards weren't just broken, they were empty. The team had tried rebooting the model orchestration layer that morning, hoping for a miracle. Instead, they got a white screen with one stark line across the top. Framework deactivated, licensing expired, contact vendor, no loading spinner, no recovery script, just silence. Support engineers pinged each other across Slack channels that had gone from mildly frantic to full-on DEFCON 2. Managers clung to ancient PDF exports. Sales huddled in calls, trying to guess what leads might be hot based on calendar invites and gut feelings. Marketing kept refreshing their visual dashboards, like maybe, just maybe, the next load would bring back segmentation logic or predictive tags. It didn't. One by one, team leads gave up and walked into the main conference room where the CEO sat stone-faced at the end of the table, laptop open, jaw tight. No scarf, no usual clicky pen, just the raw, choking sound of panic trying to pretend it still had leverage. I want this reinstated, she snapped, pointing to the banner like sheer authority might bully the pixels back into compliance. Reverse it, now. Legal had already joined via speakerphone. Her voice came through flat, neutral. She didn't breach, Legal said. You did. Silence. Clause 7.4b, she executed her right to terminate under breach conditions. The framework is proprietary. We were renters. You mocked the landlord. The CTO sat beside her, head down, a legal pad full of chicken scratch notes he'd stopped pretending to understand. He muttered, You mocked her. She was the architecture. The CEO didn't respond. Maybe because there wasn't a comeback that would change the truth. Maybe because she realized too late that her smirk didn't scale. Meanwhile, I wasn't in that room. I was at Echelon's downtown studio, surrounded by fresh whiteboards and a team of 6 engineers who were actually listening, really listening, as I laid out the modular core for Gen 2. The new system would be faster, leaner. Not because I had something to prove to Zentek, but because, for the first time in years, I had the freedom to build without begging for understanding. My name was on every flow diagram. This time, no one would erase it. Back at Zentek, one of the junior engineers, sharp kid, probably the only one who ever asked me about back-end sharding on his own time, dug through a snapshot from last week's feature sprint deck. He zoomed into a chart of the model stack and paused. There it was. Barely visible in the lower corner of the render, embedded like a quiet signature. Valen Systems IP 2011-2026. He screenshotted it. Posted it to the dev Slack. No commentary, just the image. It spread like wildfire. Suddenly, everyone understood it had never been Zentex to own, only to borrow. And they hadn't just lost a product, they'd lost the source. And the source had moved on. The forensic sweep started the same way most desperation moves do, with someone in legal saying, "We should review the original correspondence." That's corporate code for "we might have screwed this up years ago. Let's see how bad it really is." So they dug. Through threads, attachments, revision history, and a dozen Slack archives that had never been properly retention flagged. And there it was, in plain text. My original pitch deck from 2014. 78 slides, clean logic trees, modular flowcharts, usage thresholds, and a license structure that mirrored modern software as a service architecture before half the exec team even knew what containerization meant. They'd skimmed it back then, maybe read the summary page. Definitely never opened the appendix where I detailed the risk matrix around IP breach and renewal cycles. What they did find, and forwarded internally in a firestorm of BCCs, was an email from the CEO, dated 2 weeks after the pitch. Subject line, RE AI Framework Proposal, Initial Review. Her message was short, casual. Looks clever, but overbuilt. I doubt this framework has long-term viability. Let's move forward, but avoid overinvesting. We'll replace it eventually. That line hit different now, because the framework they dismissed as temporary, it had powered 92% of their machine learning output across OPS, sales, marketing, logistics, and R&D for over a decade. And now it was gone. The team they'd assembled to absorb the transition was already falling apart. My designated replacement, a kid with a dual master's and a TikTok habit, had lasted 4 days before submitting his resignation. Apparently, he opened the system root, realized he had zero access to weight initialization, no permissions for training pipeline management, and the data store scripts were password protected behind infrastructure he couldn't even map. His final Slack message read, "Respectfully, this isn't a recovery job, it's an autopsy." By Thursday, the board was asking questions. A red folder made its way into the CEO's hands, containing printed snapshots from the old dev wiki, last cached the day before my departure. One entry stood out. System root, valin.sys.admin.local. Access revoked unless renewal signed. No one had noticed it. Or maybe they had and assumed it was just a placeholder domain, but it wasn't. It was a hard-coded, license-gated root trigger, a single line, sitting in plain sight for years. Waiting. I didn't see the fallout firsthand, didn't want to. I was too busy watching the Gen 2 orchestration layer at Echelon hit 98.2% test efficiency in Sandbox. The team clapped. Someone brought champagne. I took a sip and got back to work. Because I wasn't gloating, I didn't need to. My absence did all the talking. The call came just after 6 p.m. I recognized the number immediately, though I deleted it weeks ago. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Her voice was thinner than I remembered, forced calm wrapped around a throat full of damage control. "I wanted to talk," she said, like we were old friends navigating a misunderstanding over coffee, not a CEO whose arrogance had gutted her company's neural spine. "We've been reviewing everything. There's no question you were integral. We acted hastily. That's clear now." I didn't say anything. She filled the silence. "We'd like to bring you back as executive advisor. Triple your prior salary, fully remote, set your own schedule, no direct reports, just strategic oversight, autonomy. You'd have autonomy." I almost laughed. Autonomy, the thing I'd carved for myself while they called me overcautious, called the framework bloated, called my license terms unnecessary complexity. She didn't realize the offer wasn't insulting. It was hollow, like building a throne out of ash. "I already gave my loyalty," I said, voice even, "once." There was a pause. She didn't try to argue. That surprised me. Then she said, "What would it take?" And that was when the shift happened. The moment she understood I wasn't walking back through that door, not even for triple the money or a polished new title. I wasn't an employee anymore. I was the vendor now. So I gave her the only thing I had left to offer, the price. "I can refer you to a third-party consultant," I said. "They'll manage a secure license for a limited version of the framework, firewalled, read-only model access, no customization, quarterly renewals, triple the original fee." Another pause. "Is that really necessary?" I didn't answer, because she already knew. You don't Burn the bridge and then haggle over the toll to cross the river you set on fire. They accepted, of course. They didn't have a choice. Zentech's AI wasn't limping, it was clinically dead, and their stock projections were about to follow if something didn't plug the holes. I looped in a trusted contact, someone who knew the framework but wasn't emotionally tied to the wreckage. She signed the NDA. They signed the license. My LLC collected its first quarterly payment 2 days later, on time. No questions. And just like that, the architect they discarded was now the name on their invoices. A week later, someone forwarded me a PDF of their new internal roadmap deck. Initiative title, Resilience. Cute. The launch barely got off the ground. Their PR team pushed out a blog post about rediscovering core values and prioritizing long-term stability. It got 27 likes on LinkedIn and was promptly buried under a comment thread asking why Zentech's product recommendations were still broken. Meanwhile, at Echelon, Gen 2 moved into final deployment. The difference wasn't just technical, it was cultural. People actually asked questions. They documented. They listened. They didn't pretend to understand things they didn't. And more importantly, they didn't punish me for being the one who did. I didn't rub any of it in. I didn't need to. Because Zentech had finally learned the lesson they tried so hard to avoid. You can't innovate on top of contempt. And you can't buy back loyalty once you've taught someone what their absence really costs. 6 weeks later, we went live. No countdown clock, no pyrotechnics, no internal champagne stunt with the C-suite pretending they understood backpropagation. Just a clean deployment at scale. And it worked. The model didn't just match Zentech's old numbers, it obliterated them. 30% lift in predictive accuracy, 40% reduction in drift, time to inference down by half. Clients noticed. Quietly at first, emails with subject lines like quick queue on the new rec engine and your model just nailed our churn list. Then came the calls, contracts, conversions, and at the bottom of every client dashboard in muted gray font sat a simple line of text, Core Engine by Valens Systems, licensed exclusively through Echelon Systems Inc. They saw it. Zentech definitely saw it, because that week, a mid-level PM posted a LinkedIn update celebrating resilience through challenge, trying to spin the silence in their Q3 roadmap into some kind of strategic patience. No one bought it. At the annual Pacific AI Tech Summit, Echelon was featured on day 2. Lauren took the stage. No slides, no fluff, just her, in a charcoal blazer, calm as steel. Here's what we've learned, she said. AI isn't magic, it's architecture, and architecture has architects. Respect the builders or watch them walk. The room went still. The camera panned to the crowd. Some clapped, some sat frozen. And in the third row, I caught a glimpse of someone from Zentech. Pale, unsmiling. I watched the live stream from my new office. No glass walls, no performative beanbag corner. Just real tools, a real team, and my own damn name on the project folder. I didn't grin, didn't toast, didn't text a single told you so. I just leaned back, let the moment breathe, and took one long, quiet inhale. This wasn't revenge, it was realignment. They dismissed me as replaceable, but what they never understood, what they still didn't understand, is that control doesn't vanish. It evolves. When the architect chooses where to rebuild,